I was hired to kill the Korean Mafia boss, and his next move turned my blood cold. The gun felt heavier than it should have. Chidinma stood in the private dining room, the weight of the weapon pressed against her ribs beneath her jacket, watching Kang Seo-jun pour tea with hands that had ordered deaths without flinching. He knew. The stillness in his movements told her everything. The way he set the cup down without looking at her. The way his shoulders held no tension despite being alone with someone sent to end him. The question wasn't whether he'd figured it out. The question was why he was pretending he hadn't. "You're quieter than usual," he said, his voice carrying that dangerous calm she'd learned meant someone was about to lose everything. "Something on your mind." Her finger brushed the trigger guard through the fabric, 3 feet between them. One motion. But his eyes met hers in the reflection of the window, and the certainty she'd carried into this room cracked down the middle. "First time here, you're already in, stay close. The next story's already in motion." 8 weeks earlier. The gallery opening in Itaewon was the kind of event where power wore tailored suits and spoke in languages that carried price tags. Chidinma moved through the crowd with a champagne flute she hadn't sipped from, her eye tracking exits and security patterns the way her uncle had taught her before everything in Lagos fell apart. She wasn't here for the art. She was here because Park Jae-hun had paid her 30 million won up front to document the man standing near the Rothko piece, the one every other guest was carefully not staring at. Kang Seo-jun, 32, head of operations for one of Seoul's oldest organizations, though his business card claimed real estate development. The file Jae-hun had given her listed 14 suspected kills, none proven, and a reputation for strategy that had kept him alive through 3 syndicate wars. He looked younger than his dossier suggested, sharp-featured, composed, a tattoo visible just above his collar when he turned his head. A snake's tail, she thought, though she couldn't see the rest. "You're holding that glass like it might explode." The voice came from behind her, accented Korean, smooth but direct. "Usually means someone's working, not enjoying." Chidinma turned. A woman in her 40s, elegant, watching her with the assessment of someone who'd built survival on reading people. "Just admiring the collection," Chidinma said in Korean, keeping her Igbo accent light but present. "I'm new to Seoul's art scene." And photographing it from memory. The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Kim Hae-won, I curate for collectors who prefer discretion." The warning was clear. "You've been noticed." Chidinma adjusted her approach without hesitation. "Chidinma Akafer. I document cultural integration projects. Sometimes the most interesting art is how people position themselves in a room." "Interesting?" Haewon's gaze shifted briefly toward Seo-jun. "That particular positioning has a steep cost for those who study it too closely. Friendly advice from someone who values intelligent women staying alive." She walked away before Chidinma could respond, leaving a business card on the nearby table. The message had landed. This wasn't a game she understood yet. Seo-jun moved toward the exit 20 minutes later, flanked by 2 men who cleared space without appearing to. Chidinma followed protocol, waited 90 seconds, then left through the service entrance. She'd gotten what Jae-hun wanted: schedule patterns, security gaps, behavioral baseline. The first payment would clear by morning. What she didn't photograph was the moment Seo-jun had glanced directly at the camera she'd hidden in her bracelet, his expression unchanged, before turning back to his conversation. Jae-hun's office in Gangnam occupied the top floor of a building that officially housed import-export logistics. The reality was less legal and more liquid. Money moved through these rooms the way blood moved through a body, keeping something dark and necessary alive. Chidinma had worked for him for 6 weeks, ever since her visa documentation had mysteriously smoothed over, and her architecture credentials had somehow satisfied employers who shouldn't have accepted them. She hadn't asked why. Debt came in many forms, and sometimes survival meant accepting the interest rate. "He's planning something." Jae-hun studied the photo she'd taken, his fingers drumming against the desk. Mid-50s, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who'd built an empire by knowing which threats to eliminate before they materialized. 3 meetings with the Mingguk faction in 2 weeks, either consolidation or betrayal. You want me to keep monitoring? Chidinma kept her voice professional. Document, report, collect payment. Those were the boundaries she'd set. I want you to get closer. Jae-hun set down the photos. You're educated, foreign, no obvious connections to any organization. He's careful about Koreans in his circle, but outsiders register differently. Less threat, more curiosity. I'm not an infiltrator. No, you're an architectural consultant who's brilliant at reading spaces and the people who occupy them. He slid a contract across the desk. 200 million won, 6 months. Attend the same functions, develop professional overlap, report on his movements and associations. Nothing dangerous, just proximity. The number made her throat tight. 200 million won was a year of safety, maybe more. It was the difference between running and rebuilding. But the weight of it felt wrong, like accepting a gift that came with invisible strings. Why me? Because you're smart enough to know when to disappear if things go wrong, and because you need this money more than you need to ask questions. Jae-hun's expression softened slightly. I'm not asking you to betray anyone, Chidinma. I'm asking you to observe, that's all. She signed. The ink felt permanent in a way that made her fingers cold. The first intentional intersection happened at a real estate development presentation in Samseongdong. Chidinma had been invited as part of a consulting group reviewing urban integration projects, legitimate work that Jae-hun's network had arranged. Seo-jun was there representing investors, his presence making the room's energy shift like air pressure before a storm. She asked a question during the Q&A about preservation of historical architecture in modern development zones. It was specific, informed, designed to sound like genuine professional interest. His answer was equally precise, and when the session ended, he was the one who approached her. You're the consultant from the Lagos Urban Initiative Project. Not a question. He'd researched her. Your paper on adaptive reuse in West African port cities was referenced in a journal I follow. The paper was real. She'd written it 3 years ago before everything collapsed. That he'd found it meant he'd looked beyond surface level. You read architectural journals. I read anything that helps me understand how cities breathe, how spaces influence behavior, movement, power distribution. His focus was complete, the kind of attention that made you feel either seen or exposed. Buildings are just strategy made solid. And people. People are the strategy before it hardens. His slight smile carried no warmth, only recognition. You're working with the Hansung Development Group. Their last 3 projects failed city inspections until very specific council members changed their votes. Interesting firm to consult for. The warning was elegant. I know exactly who you're connected to. Chidinma held his gaze. I evaluate structural integrity, not political relationships. My reputation depends on honest assessment, regardless of who signs the check. Good. Reputation is the only currency that can't be counterfeited. He handed her a card, minimalist, expensive paper, just a name and number. My organization is developing a mixed-use complex in Yongsan. Could use a genuine structural assessment before we finalize acquisitions, if you're interested in work that won't compromise your integrity. It was a test or a trap, possibly both. I'll review the project specs, she said. I'll send them tonight. He moved past her toward the exit, then paused. The gallery opening last month. You were studying sight lines and security patterns, not art, professional habit or specific interest. Her pulse kicked once, hard. Architecture is about understanding how people use space. Gallery security is just applied spatial psychology. MMM. The sound was neither agreement nor challenge. We'll see if your assessments hold up under pressure. He left and Chidinma realized her hands were trembling. Not from fear. From the sudden understanding that he was 10 moves ahead, and she'd just been invited onto a board where the rules changed mid-game. The Yongsan project was legitimate, extensive, complex, exactly the kind of work she'd come to soul-hopping to find before desperation had narrowed her choices. The plans showed vision, historical preservation integrated with modern housing, commercial spaces designed for community flow, structural innovation that respected the neighborhood's bones. It was beautiful. It was also worth billions, and every page carried the weight of decisions that would displace thousands if executed wrong. She spent 2 weeks on assessment, cross-referencing permits, surveying sites, interviewing community representatives. Her report was honest. The project could work, but only with specific modifications to protect existing infrastructure and populations. She expected the contract to disappear. Instead, Seo-jun requested a meeting. His office wasn't what she'd imagined. No dark luxury, no intimidation architecture. Instead, minimalist functionality, walls lined with books about urban planning, philosophy, military strategy. The view faced a neighborhood park where children played, incongruous with the man who watched them with unreadable focus. Your report recommended changes that will cost me $40 million and 8 months delay. He set the document down. Most consultants would have found creative ways to approve the original plans. You hired me for honest assessment. That's what you received. I did, and you're the first consultant in 3 years who didn't assume I wanted convenient lies. He leaned back, studying her. The community interviews you included weren't in the original scope. Neither was the historical impact analysis. You did unpaid work to ensure accuracy. The project affects real lives. That requires complete context. Yes, it does. Something shifted in his expression, not softening but recognition of a principle met. I'm implementing your modifications, all of them, and I'm offering you a position as permanent structural advisor for all our development projects. The salary is competitive. The work is legitimate. The association will raise questions you'll need to answer carefully. Chidinma felt the trap's jaws closing, gentle as silk. Questions from who? Anyone smart enough to wonder why someone with your credentials is in Seoul on a visa that should have expired 2 months ago, working for firms connected to organizations that don't usually employ foreign consultants without leverage. His voice held no threat, just fact. I'm not asking about your situation. I'm offering you a way to stabilize it that doesn't require compromising your standards. But if you accept, you'll be visible. People will assume things about your loyalties. Some of those assumptions will be dangerous. Why offer this? Because I need someone who won't lie to me when the numbers don't work, even if honesty costs money. That's rare, worth protecting. He slid a contract across the desk, simpler than Jae-hun's, clearer in scope, terrifying in its implications. Think about it. No pressure, but the offer expires when you leave this office. I don't extend trust twice. The choice felt impossible. Accept and become fully entangled in whatever web Seo-jun was building, or refuse and return to Jae-hun's surveillance work, with the knowledge that she just rejected the exact opportunity she'd come to Seoul to find. She thought of her mother's voice on their last call before the Lagos disaster. When everything is burning, find the thing that doesn't require you to become ash to survive. I need to know what I'm actually signing on for. Her voice was steady, not euphemisms, reality. Seo-jun's pause felt like evaluation. Then, my organization operates in gray markets because legitimate systems are rigged against entry. We control territory, manage conflicts, provide services the city pretends don't exist. Violence happens. I won't lie about that. But my projects, the developments, the investments, the community infrastructure, those are clean. That's not strategy. That's principle. I'm building exit routes for people who come after me. You'd be working on the legitimate side, but your name will be associated with mine. That association has consequences. People have died for less. The honesty was more dangerous than any threat. It gave her responsibility for her own choice, No room for claiming ignorance later. One condition, Chidinma said. If I find anything in your projects that would harm the communities they're supposed to serve, I report it, publicly if necessary. That's non-negotiable. Agreed, with one addition, you report it to me first. Give me a chance to fix it before burning everything down. If I don't, then you do what your conscience requires. He extended his hand. We have a deal. She shook it. His grip was firm, brief, and she felt the full weight of the decision settle into her bones. What she didn't tell him. Jae-hun's contract had 3 months remaining, and she just agreed to report on the man she was now working for from the inside. The first month was a careful dance of competing obligations. She provided Jae-hun with surface information, meeting schedules, business developments, nothing that compromised the architectural work or crossed into active betrayal. She told herself the distinction mattered. Jae-hun seemed satisfied with the access, and her payments continued. Seo-jun's projects consumed her days: site inspections, permit negotiations, community presentations. The work was real, demanding, exactly what she trained for. But proximity bred complications. Seo-jun was exacting but fair. He remembered details about his staff's lives, asked about her mother in Lagos, noticed when she'd been working 16-hour days, once shut down an entire meeting when a developer spoke over her third time. He was also ruthless in ways that surfaced quietly. A competitor's project mysteriously failed inspection. A city official who demanded bribes was photographed somewhere that ended his career. A land acquisition that should have taken years cleared in weeks through channels she didn't want to examine. You're frowning. They were reviewing plans in his office late on a Thursday, the city lights below making Seoul look like a circuit board. Structural problem or moral one? Chidinma set down her pen. The Seongsu project, the original landowners who refused to sell, they accepted your offer yesterday. All of them simultaneously after 6 months of refusal. They did. What changed their minds? I increased the offer to triple market value and guaranteed them first option on commercial leases in the completed building. Also ensured their businesses would have rent-controlled spaces for 10 years. He met her gaze. You're wondering what else I did. I'm wondering if that's all you did. It is, but you're right to wonder. Asking those questions is why I hired you. He pulled up a folder on his laptop, turned it toward her. Every communication, every negotiation record, every payment documented. You can audit all of it. I told you the work is clean. I meant it. She reviewed the files. They matched his explanation. Relief and suspicion warred in her chest. Why show me this? Because doubt is poison. Either trust that I'll keep my word about the projects or leave. I won't have someone working for me who has to guess whether they're complicit in something that violates their principles. His voice was firm but not cold. This only works if you believe I'll maintain the boundary between business and development. The day you stop believing that, we're done. Clear. Clear. Good. Now tell me why the Gangbuk site's foundation calculations don't account for the subway expansion plan for 2026. The shift back to work was seamless, but something had changed. He'd handed her power over him, information access, the ability to verify his claims. It was either genuine trust or an elaborate manipulation, and she couldn't tell which. The uncertainty kept her awake that night, staring at her ceiling, wondering if she was being slowly compromised or if she'd finally found someone who operated by rules she could respect. Both possibilities terrified her equally. The unraveling began with a photograph. Chidinma was leaving Seo-jun's office building when someone grabbed her arm in the parking garage, fast, professional, dragging her between cars before she could scream. A hand covered her mouth. Then a voice, low and urgent, "Don't fight. 30 seconds, then I'm gone. Listen." The grip loosened enough for her to breathe. The man was young, mid-20s, with fear that smelled like sweat and desperation. Park Jae-hun is setting you up. The contract you signed, it's not surveillance. You're being positioned as Kang Seo-jun's foreign accomplice. When Jae-hun moves against him, you'll be the evidence that his organization is compromised. International connections, financial transfers, your name on his projects, it all makes you the perfect scapegoat. Who are you? Someone who got out before Jae-hun could burn me the same way. There's a file, USB drive hidden in your apartment's air vent above the kitchen. I put it there 3 days ago. Everything you need to know about what he's actually paying you to do. He shoved her away hard. Run or leverage it, your choice. But if you're still working for both of them next week, you're already dead. He disappeared into the garage shadows, leaving Chidinma with a racing pulse and a decision she couldn't unmake. She drove home in a fog, her mind running through every interaction with Jae-hun, every report she'd filed, every payment she'd accepted. The apartment felt different when she entered, violated, despite no visible signs of entry. The USB drive was exactly where he'd said, wrapped in plastic, labeled with a date from 2 weeks ago. She plugged it in with hands that shook. The file opened. Communications between Jae-hun and prosecutors, development plans for a case against Seo-jun's organization, financial forensics that traced money through shell companies to her accounts. There were photographs of her and Seo-jun, leaving his office, reviewing sites together, sitting in restaurants discussing projects. Each one captioned with implications of conspiracy, money laundering, foreign criminal cooperation. But what made her blood cold was the final document. A draft arrest warrant with her name listed first, issued to be served the day after Jae-hun's planned operation against Seo-jun. She wasn't surveillance. She was the justification. The foreign element that would make prosecutors pay attention, that would give Jae-hun legal cover for a territorial move disguised as law enforcement cooperation. She'd been a weapon aimed at Seo-jun since the moment she'd signed that contract, and she'd been too desperate for the money to see it. The nausea hit in waves. Every report she'd given Jae-hun, every detail about Seo-jun's movements and associations, she'd been building the case that would destroy them both. And if she disappeared now, ran the way her instincts screamed at her to run, it would only confirm guilt and leave Seo-jun walking blind into betrayal. Her phone buzzed. Text from Seo-jun, site inspection tomorrow 7 a.m. Bring the MAPO calculations, breakfast after. Normal, trusting, completely unaware that his structural advisor was the center of a trap that would close within days. Chidinma stared at the message, then at the files still glowing on her laptop screen. She'd spent 6 weeks believing she could navigate between competing obligations, that information was neutral, that her architectural work was separate from the surveillance. The naivety of it felt suffocating now. She had 3 choices: run and let them both burn, warn Seo-jun, and accept whatever consequences came from her betrayal of Jae-hun, or find a way to dismantle the trap that didn't destroy everyone it touched. Her phone buzzed again. Different number, no name. The USB drive he gave you is incomplete. I have the rest. Meet me at Noryangjin Fish Market 5 am tomorrow. Come alone. Or don't and find out what Jae-hun does to people who outlive their usefulness. The trap had just grown teeth in every direction, and Chidinma realized she'd stopped being a player in this game several moves ago. Now she was just the piece being traded before the board was flipped. The fish market at 5 a.m. was chaos organized by decades of routine. Vendors shouting bids, seafood gleaming under harsh lights, the smell of ocean and commerce thick enough to taste. Chidinma moved through the crowds with a knife tucked into her jacket pocket, not because she knew how to use it, but because going completely defenseless felt like surrender. The woman from the gallery, Kim Hae-won, sat at a pajangmatcha cart drinking soju and eating raw octopus like she had all the time in the world. She gestured to the empty stool without looking up. You came. Smart. Stupid would be ignoring this meeting and hopping your problems solve themselves. You put the USB drive in my apartment, not a question. My associate did. I provided the information. Hae-won slid a second drive across the counter. This one includes Jae-hun's contingency plans if you don't cooperate, Seo-jun's counterintelligence on Jae-hun's organization, and prosecutor communications showing they know exactly what Jae-hun is using you for, and plan to flip you as a witness whether you want to cooperate or not. Chidinma's chest tightened. Why are you giving me this? Because Seo-jun pays me to protect his interests, and right now you're positioned to either save him or guarantee his destruction. I'd prefer the former. Hae-won finally looked at her, and the coldness in her gaze was absolute. You made a mistake thinking you could work for both sides without consequences. Now you fix it, or I do, and you won't like my methods. What do you want me to do? Tell him tonight everything. Every report you gave Jae-hun, every piece of information you compromised, every detail of the trap. She pushed the soju bottle toward Chidinma. Then let him decide if you're worth keeping alive. He'll kill me. Maybe, probably not though if you're smart about how you present it. He values honesty more than loyalty. One you can rebuild, the other you already broke. But if you wait, if Jae-hun moves first and Seo-jun finds out you knew and said nothing, then yes. You're dead, and I'm the one who'll clean it up. The casual certainty of it made Chidinma's hands shake. You're offering me a chance to confess before I'm executed. I'm offering you a chance to demonstrate you're worth the resources Seo-jun invested in you. There's a difference. Hae-won stood, dropped cash on the counter. The operation against Seo-jun is set for 72 hours from now. You have until then to decide if you're going to drown or swim. Choose fast, choose right. And Chidinma, she leaned close, voice dropping to barely audible. Whatever you decide, the architecture work you've been doing is real and good. Don't let this erase that. There are ways to survive this that don't require you to become someone you'll hate. She disappeared into the market crowd, leaving Chidinma with 2 USB drives and a decision that felt like choosing between bullets. She didn't sleep, couldn't eat, spent the day's site inspection moving through mechanical motions while her mind spiraled through scenarios, each one ending in variations of destruction. Seo-jun noticed but didn't push, just watched her with that complete focus that felt like being X-rayed. When the inspection finished, he dismissed the team but gestured for her to stay. You've been compromised. Not a question, not an accusation, just statement of fact. Someone got to you, showed you something, and now you're deciding whether to run or tell me. Chidinma's throat closed. How? You're brilliant at hiding fear, but your risk assessment patterns changed. You checked exits 6 times in the last hour, positioned yourself near egress points, kept your back to walls. Combat awareness from someone who's never needed it before. So, either tell me what happened or leave now and I'll pretend this conversation never occurred. But if you leave, don't come back to Seoul. That's not a threat. That's logistics. The gentleness of it broke something in her chest. She pulled out both USB drives, set them on the hood of his car. I was working for Park Jae-hun before you hired me. He paid me to surveil you, report on your movements and associations. I took the contract because I needed the money and told myself information was neutral. It wasn't. He's been building a case against you using everything I reported. There's an operation planned for 3 days from now, prosecutors, raid warrants, international conspiracy charges. My name is listed as a co-conspirator, but the real goal is to dismantle your organization and give Jae-hun legal cover to take your territory. Seo-jun's expression didn't change. He picked up the drives, weighed them in his palm. How long have you known about the operation? Since yesterday. I was contacted, given the first drive, threatened with exposure if I didn't cooperate with prosecutors. But you came to me instead. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the drives like they contained something fragile. Why? Because the architectural work is real. Because you kept your word about protecting the communities. Because, her voice cracked. Because I've spent my entire life watching people justify compromises until they can't remember what they stood for, and I won't become that, even if it kills me. It might. He pocketed the drives, then looked at her with something that wasn't quite forgiveness but might have been understanding. You betrayed me, methodically for weeks. While I trusted you with projects that could determine hundreds of people's futures. By every practical measure, I should eliminate the problem you represent. I know. But you also just handed me intelligence that could save my organization, destabilize a rival, and prevent a legal catastrophe. And you did it knowing I might kill you for it anyway. That's either profound stupidity or actual integrity. He exhaled slowly. I can't decide which yet. What happens now? Now you tell me everything. Every report, every meeting with Jae-hun, every detail you compromised. All of it completely no protection. Then I decide if you're an asset or a liability. His voice was cold now, professional, the warmth from earlier discussions buried under strategic assessment. You won't like the process. I need to verify you're not still playing both sides. That requires measures you'll find invasive. But it's that or disappear, and I'm giving you the choice Jae-hun never did. Chidinma nodded, feeling the last threads of control slip away. I'll tell you everything. Good, get in the car. We're going somewhere private, and you're going to spend the next 12 hours convincing me you're worth the resources it would take to keep you alive. She got in. The door closed with the finality of a vault ceiling, and as they pulled out of the parking lot, Chidinma caught her reflection in the side mirror, exhausted, terrified, but something else too. Relief, maybe, or the strange peace that came from finally standing on solid ground, even if that ground was about to open up and swallow her whole. The debriefing took 16 hours, not 12. Seo-jun's questions were surgical, cross-referencing her answers against phone records, surveillance footage, financial transactions he'd apparently been tracking without her knowledge. Haewon was there for most of it, her presence somehow both reassuring and threatening, proof that Seo-jun had known something was wrong but had been waiting to see which direction Chidinma would choose. You took a call from Jae-hun on October 15th, 11:30 p.m. You told him I had meetings scheduled with the Mingguk faction. What exactly did you report? Meeting times, locations, attendees. Nothing about content, I wasn't present for those. But you speculated. In your report, you suggested I was planning either consolidation or betrayal. Jae-hun's words, not mine. He interpreted the data that way, and I didn't contradict him. Why not? Because I didn't know what you were actually planning, and contradicting him felt like protection I hadn't earned yet. And the Yongsan project. You gave him full details about community impact assessments and permit timelines. Why? He asked specifically. I thought it was public information. Permits are filed with the city, accessible to anyone. The timing wasn't public. The sequence of approvals wasn't public. You gave him a roadmap to disrupt the development at critical junctures. Seo-jun's voice was flat, factual, devastating. 3 of our timeline delays this month trace back to complaints filed with the exact permits you mentioned in your reports. Coincidence? The realization hit like a physical blow. I never thought. You didn't think that's the problem. Information is never neutral, Chidinma. Every piece you gave him was a weapon, and you handed them over while telling yourself you were just observing. He leaned back, rubbed his face with both hands. The exhaustion in the gesture was the first crack in his professional armor she'd seen. Haewon wants me to cut you loose. Says you're too compromised to rehabilitate, too visible to keep close. She's probably right. Then why am I still breathing? Because I'm trying to determine if you learned anything from this. He met her eyes across the table. I broke the law tonight. Keeping you here this long without counsel, without charges, extracting information through exhaustion and intimidation. That's illegal. I'm doing it because I need to know if you understand what you did, not just that you regret the consequences. I understand. I compromised your safety, your projects, your people's futures. I justified it with financial desperation and told myself I was maintaining boundaries that didn't actually exist. I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. Why didn't you come to me when you needed money? I would have hired you legitimately from the start." The question landed like an accusation, because I didn't trust that anything legitimate was actually available. I'd been scammed twice in Lagos, lost everything to corruption, and when I got to Seoul, the only people who offered help were connected to organizations I knew were criminal. It felt safer to take Jae-hun's contract and maintain distance than to accept something that felt too good to be true. So you chose the devil you expected over the opportunity you didn't trust. Yes. Seo-jun was quiet for a long time. Then, I grew up in a neighborhood where the only way to survive was to join an organization or be crushed by one. I chose survival, then spent 15 years trying to build something cleaner inside a system built on violence. Every legitimate project I fund is me trying to create options I never had. And you, his voice hardened. You're exactly the kind of person those projects are supposed to protect. Smart, capable, trapped by circumstances, looking for a way out. And I failed to make that clear enough for you to trust it. This isn't your fault. Parts of it are. I hired you because I saw potential, but I didn't invest in making you feel secure enough to be honest. That's on me. But Chidinma, he stood, walked to the window overlooking the city. I can work with mistakes. I can work with fear. I cannot work with someone who doesn't trust me enough to be honest when the stakes are this high. So tell me, if I keep you, if I protect you through what's coming with Jae-hun, if I invest in rebuilding your position and reputation, will you run the first time things get complicated again? The question deserved complete honesty. I don't know. I want to say no, but I've been in survival mode so long that I don't trust my own judgment about when to fight and when to run. That's the first completely honest thing you've said since you sat down. Something in his expression shifted, not forgiveness, but recognition. All right, here's what happens. I'm going to dismantle Jae-hun's operation before he can execute his raid. You're going to help by providing testimony about his recruitment methods, the coercion, the false promises. Then you're going on temporary leave from the projects while prosecutors and my legal team sort out your liability exposure. If you survive the legal process without flipping on me, we'll revisit your employment. If you don't, if you accept a deal that requires testifying against me, I'll understand. But you'll leave Seoul and you won't come back. And if Jae-hun tries to kill me first, then I protect you. Not because you've earned it, but because I don't abandon people who make one mistake, no matter how expensive. But Chidinma, you don't get a second one. Clear. Clear. Good. Haewon will take you to a safe location. You'll stay there until this is resolved. No phone, no internet, no contact with anyone except my people. It's protective custody and house arrest in one. Comfortable prison, but prison nonetheless. She nodded, the weight of it settling like stones. Thank you for not killing me. Thank me by becoming someone worthy of the faith I'm about to put in dangerous places to keep you alive. He opened the door, gestured to Haewon who'd been waiting outside. And Chidinma, the architecture work really was good. When this is over, if you're still standing, we'll talk about what trust looks like when it's rebuilt from ashes. But right now, you're a liability I'm choosing to protect. Don't make me regret it. The safe house was a minimalist apartment in Seongbuk-dong with a view of mountains and enough security to make Chidinma understand exactly how serious the threat was. Haewon delivered her there with instructions that felt like military protocol. Stay away from windows. Don't establish routines. If anything feels wrong, hit the panic button and wait for extraction. Then she left, and Chidinma was alone with her thoughts and the crushing awareness of consequences she was still uncovering. The next 3 days unfolded through Haewon's brief updates. Jae-hun's operation was moved up, then mysteriously delayed. 2 of his key prosecutors received anonymous files about evidence tampering in previous cases. A witness who was supposed to testify about Seo-jun's activities disappeared, not violently, but relocated to Singapore with enough money to start over and a clear message about what would happen if he returned. The trap that was supposed to close around Seo-jun, was being methodically dismantled, piece by piece, with a surgical precision that should have felt satisfying, but instead just made Chidinma more aware of the kind of power she'd tried to play against. On the fourth day, Haewon arrived with a visitor. Seo-jun looked older, tired in a way that spoke to days without sleep and decisions that wore on the soul. He sat across from Chidinma at the apartment's small table, set down a folder she recognized as her employment contract with his organization. Jae-hun is finished, not dead, arrested along with 4 prosecutors he'd compromised. The evidence was thorough enough that they'll be occupied with legal defense for years. His organization is fragmenting. The territory he controlled is being absorbed, mostly by neutral parties to prevent another war. He said it clinically, like reading a weather report. You're clear of criminal charges. The prosecutors accepted that you were coerced, and your testimony about his methods was convincing. Your visa status is resolved. You can stay in Seoul or leave. That's entirely your choice. And the projects? On track, I brought in another structural consultant to cover your absence. She's competent but not you. The community trust you'd built, she's having to start from scratch. He opened the folder. I'm offering you your position back. Same salary, same scope with 2 conditions. First, you attend weekly security briefings so you understand what threats exist and who's watching. No more operating blind. Second, if you're ever compromised again, if anyone approaches you with money or threats or promises, you tell me immediately. Not after you've been sitting on it for weeks. Not when you've decided it's bad enough to report. Immediately. Why would you trust me again? Because you made the right choice when it mattered most. You could have run, could have taken a prosecutor deal, could have let me walk into Jae-hun's trap. You didn't. That counts for something. He pushed the contract toward her. But I'm not going to pretend this is without risk. People will question your loyalty. Some of my associates want you gone permanently, regardless of what you did to fix it. Your presence is a visible reminder that I was compromised, and that makes them uncomfortable. If you come back, you'll be working under scrutiny that will never fully disappear. And if I leave, then I'll write you a recommendation that will open doors anywhere you want to go. You'll have 2 years severance, enough to establish yourself independently. The work you've already done stands on its merit. You'd be fine. The choice felt heavier than it should have. Stay and rebuild something from wreckage, or take the clean exit and start over somewhere the stakes were lower. Both felt like survival, but only one felt like growth. The Gangbuk project. The foundation calculations I mentioned needed revision. Did the new consultant catch that? She did, but she didn't catch the drainage problem in the Mapo site until I pointed her to your original notes. You think systemically, she thinks structurally. There's a difference. I want to come back. The words came out firm, certain. Not because I need the money or because I don't have options. Because the work matters and I'm better at it than I've let myself believe. And because I'd rather rebuild trust than run from the fact that I broke it. Seo-jun's expression didn't change, but something in his posture relaxed fractionally. All right, you start next Monday. The Yongsan project has community presentations in 2 weeks. You'll lead them. Haewon will continue as your security liaison. And Chidinma, he stood, offered his hand. Thank you for the warning, for the testimony, for not taking the easy way out. That took more courage than you probably realize. She shook his hand, felt the firmness of it, the absence of warmth but presence of respect. I won't let you down again. I know, because you understand what it costs now. He moved toward the door, then paused. The dinner we were supposed to have after the site inspection, the one that got interrupted by everything falling apart. Rain check. Yes, but I'm paying. It's the least I owe you. We'll split it. I don't accept debts from people I'm trying to trust. He left, and Chidinma sat in the quiet apartment, feeling something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not quite peace. Not yet relief, but possibility maybe. The sense that she'd walk through fire and come out holding something worth protecting. 3 months later. The Yongsan project broke ground on a Tuesday with clear skies and a crowd of community members who'd been skeptical right up until they'd seen the final plans. Chidinma stood with Seo-jun at the edge of the construction site, watching the first machines move earth that would become something lasting. The work had been brutal, every presentation scrutinized, every calculation verified twice, every community concern addressed with documentation and follow-through. But it was happening. Real, visible, good. You modified the courtyard design, Seo-jun said, studying the updated plans. Without asking. It needed better accessibility and more green space. The modifications don't affect structural integrity or budget. I ran the numbers 3 times. She waited for pushback, for the reminder that changes required approval. Instead, it's better. You should have made those changes months ago. Don't wait for permission to improve things, Chidinma. That's what I pay you for. The trust in that statement felt enormous. She'd spent 3 months rebuilding credibility in increments, accurate assessments, proactive problem-solving, transparent communication about every decision. No more shadows, no more half-truths. It was exhausting and occasionally humiliating, being watched so closely, but she understood why. Trust was earned in minutes and rebuilt over years. "Dinner tonight?" Seo-jun asked, still looking at the plans. "There's a place in Hanamdong that does incredible jjigae. Owner used to work for my family before everything went complicated. She's one of the few people who remembers me before all this." "I'd like that." Chidinma meant it. They'd had 4 dinners in the last 3 months, awkward at first, gradually settling into something that felt almost like friendship. He talked about exit strategies and the weight of responsibility. She talked about Lagos, about the things she'd lost, about slowly learning to trust her own judgment again. It wasn't romance. It was something more fundamental. 2 people who'd been forced to survive in systems designed to break them, finding recognition in each other's refusal to become what survival usually required. They watched the construction in comfortable silence until Seo-jun's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression shifted, not fear but careful attention. "Problem?" Chidinma asked. "Opportunity, maybe. There's interest from investors in expanding the development model to 3 other districts. Big money, significant visibility, the kind of project that could set precedent citywide." He pocketed the phone. "But it would mean tripling our team, navigating politics at levels where I have less control, and exposure that makes Jaihun's operation look small-scale." "You're asking if I think you should do it." "I'm asking if you'd stay if things get more complicated. Because they will. Success is louder than staying small, and loud attracts attention we can't always control." The question deserved honesty. "I don't know how to promise I'll never make another mistake or never want to run when things get hard. I'm still learning how to stand my ground instead of calculating exit routes. But I can promise I'll tell you if I'm struggling. And I'll stay as long as the work stays clean, and I'm still helping more than I'm harming." That's a better answer than certainty would have been. He smiled, rare and genuine. "All right, let's build something big enough that when we're gone, people remember it was possible to do this right." They turned back toward the cars, and Chidinma realized her hands weren't shaking, her shoulders weren't tight, her mind wasn't running through contingencies and escape plans. For the first time since Lagos collapsed, she felt like she was standing on ground that wouldn't disappear beneath her. The work would be hard. The risks wouldn't vanish. But she'd learned something in the last 4 months that survival alone hadn't taught her. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was stay and build when every instinct screamed to run. The dinner was everything Seo-jun had promised. Small restaurant, incredible food, conversation that moved from projects to philosophy to the quiet admissions people only shared when they trusted you wouldn't use them as weapons later. They talked about the difference between power and authority, about the communities they'd both tried to protect in different ways, about the strange mathematics of trying to build something good inside systems designed for extraction. "I never thanked you properly," Seo-jun said over tea after the meal. For the warning about Jae-hun, it saved more than just me. It prevented a war that would have killed people who had nothing to do with our territory disputes. I was fixing a problem I created. No, you were choosing integrity when it was expensive. There's a difference. He was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about legacy a lot lately. What we leave behind, what counts as success when you've lived in gray areas most of your life. The buildings help. The projects matter. But the real measure is probably the people, whether we made it easier for the ones who come after us to do better than we did. You're talking like you're planning to retire. Eventually, not soon, but eventually. And when I do, I'd like to know the projects will continue with the same principles. That requires training people who understand why the boundaries matter, even when breaking them would be profitable. He met her eyes. You're learning fast, Chidinma. Faster than anyone I've worked with. If you stay, if you keep this trajectory, you could run the development side within 5 years. That's not an offer, just an observation about potential. The weight of it settled in her chest, not quite hope, but the beginning of something that could become it. I'm still figuring out how to trust myself again. Running anything feels ambitious right now. Good, ambition without self-awareness is how we get people like Jae-hun. Keep figuring it out and keep doing the work. The rest will follow if you let it. They finished the tea in comfortable silence, and when they left the restaurant, Seoul felt different somehow. Less overwhelming, less hostile. Still complicated, still dangerous in ways she was learning to navigate, but no longer a place where she was just trying to survive until she could escape. The private dining room, the gun against her ribs, Seo-jun pouring tea like they had all the time in the world. Chidinma had asked for this meeting, told Haewon she needed to discuss a security concern privately, away from the office. But the moment she'd arrived and seen Seo-jun alone, his security dismissed, his focus complete, she'd realized he knew. The setup was too perfect, the vulnerability too deliberate. "You're quieter than usual," he said again, and this time she understood it wasn't observation but invitation. Say it. Whatever you came here to say, just say it. She pulled the gun from her jacket, set it on the table between them. Seo-jun glanced at it, then back at her, expression unchanged. Jae-hun's brother contacted me 3 days ago. Her voice was steady now, the fear burned away by exhaustion. Offered me 50 million won to kill you. Said you destroyed his family, that you deserve to die, that I owe him for keeping my presence in Seoul secret when I first arrived. He has photos of us, letters I sent to my mother about the work, things that could be edited to look like I've been planning this for months. If I don't do it, he'll release them and make sure I'm implicated anyway. So you brought the gun to show me you could have but didn't. Seo-jun picked up the weapon, checked the chamber empty, and set it back down. Or to let me know there's another threat circling and you need help deciding how to handle it. Both, she met his eyes. I'm tired of people assuming I can be bought or threatened into betraying you. I'm tired of having to prove I'm not compromised every time someone from your past shows up wanting revenge. But mostly, I'm tired of not knowing if staying here makes me courageous or just too stubborn to recognize when I should cut my losses and run. What do you want to do? I want to finish the Yongsan project. I want to build the 3 district expansions. I want to stop looking over my shoulder and start trusting that the ground I'm standing on isn't going to disappear. Her voice cracked slightly. But I don't know if that's possible, or if I'm just going to keep being a target because I chose to work for you. Seo-jun was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the edge of the teacup. Then, Jae-hun's brother will be handled, not violently relocated, compensated enough to start over somewhere his grudges don't define him. The photos and letters will be recovered. You'll stop being a target because I'll make it clear to everyone still circling that touching you has consequences they can't afford. He looked up. But Chidinma, I can't protect you from the choice itself. Working with me will always carry risk. People will always question your motives, your loyalty, your judgment. Some of that is fair. You made mistakes. So did I. We're both rebuilding from them, but the past doesn't disappear just because we want it to. So what do I do? You decide if the work is worth the cost, if building something good inside a complicated system matters enough to deal with the complications, if standing your ground feels better than running, even when running would be easier. He pushed the gun back toward her. And you keep bringing me the threats instead of trying to handle them alone. That's how we both survive, honest communication, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Chidinma picked up the gun, felt its weight, then set it down again. I'm staying, not because I'm naive about what that means, because I've spent enough of my life running from consequences and I'm tired of arriving nowhere. Good, then let's finish this tea, handle Jaehyun's brother tomorrow and get back to work. The Gangbuk site needs final approvals by next week, and you're the only one who understands the permit sequencing well enough to navigate it. He poured her more tea, the gesture somehow marking the moment as closed, resolved, moved beyond. They drank in silence, and Chidinma felt something shift in her chest, not quite peace, but the closest approximation she'd found since everything in Lagos fell apart. She'd walked through fire, betrayed trust, rebuilt it from ashes, and arrived at something that looked like purpose. The ground still felt uncertain sometimes, but she was learning to stand on it anyway. Outside, Seoul glittered in the darkness, full of danger and possibility in equal measure. Somewhere in that city, projects she designed were becoming real. Communities she'd fought for were watching ground break on their futures. And for the first time in years, Chidinma wasn't calculating the fastest way out. She was planning what to build next. The lesson had taken months to learn, cost her everything she'd thought was safe, and left scars that might never fully fade. But she'd learned it. Sometimes survival wasn't about running from the fire. Sometimes it was about standing in it long enough to build something that wouldn't burn. If you've ever had to choose between the easy escape and the hard rebuild, drop your story below. What did you learn about yourself when staying felt more dangerous than leaving?